I like it when people want my money. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that I want you to want my money. If you could show me something that makes me say, shut up and take my money, that makes me happy as Larry. Whoever that guy is. I'm not Larry, I'm Topher Field, and this is the Topher Project. I'm not scared of people that want my money. It's my favorite thing in the whole world is to hand my money over in exchange for something that I'm really excited about and really happy to be spending my money on. And in fact, that's the entire definition of capitalism, is that we're all just sitting out here exchanging money for goods and services based on what we want, based on what we think is best. And as long as those transactions are voluntary, there's no coercion, there's no pressure, and also they're honest, there's no deception, there's no manipulation of people, then every single one of those transactions actually makes the world a better place. And we know that because, well, if you stop and think about it, if either side of that transaction wasn't happy, then the transaction wouldn't happen. The only way that that transaction takes place is because both the buyer and the seller look at it and go, I'll be better off after this transaction than what I am right now with this transaction having not yet happened. And that means that by definition, the world becomes a better place every single time someone says, shut up and take my money. I like people that want my money because they offer me things that I like in return. That's the free market. But the government is exactly the opposite of the free market. The idea that the government and free markets can coexist is fantasy. Governments are the antithesis of a free market. Why? Well, because by definition, they're not voluntary. They use coercive power. They have the police and a military if you're from a foreign country, or even sometimes domestically. We've seen that happen in history too. But they've got an army of bureaucrats and they've got courts of law, and they can make you pay far more than just money if you choose not to do what you're told. There is nothing voluntary about anything that the government decides to do. In fact, I would go so far as to say that every single thing that a politician, or especially a police officer, but also regulators and bureaucrats, every single sentence that comes out of their mouth finishes with the implied words, or else. We're going to regulate your industry, or else. Everything finishes with, or else. You'd better come with me down to the police station and give a statement, or else. You'd better pay your taxes, or else. Absolutely everything the government does has this implied or else coming in underneath it. And by definition, there's nothing free about any exchange or transaction that we make with a politician, with a bureaucrat, with a police officer, with anyone who has the implied threat of or else backing them up. Politicians also, and governments, every interaction with them is filled with deception. So not only is it coercive, not only is it not voluntary, it's also extremely deceptive. When was the last time a politician announced a program, infrastructure, something that ran on time and on budget? It hasn't happened. In decades, it hasn't happened. And it's normal now. We think, oh, well, of course they said it was going to be $5 billion and it turns out it's now going to be $25 billion. Of course that happens. It's politics. This is just how things go. It's happened so often to us that we think it's normal. In fact, it would be weird if it didn't happen that way. So every single interaction with the government is not only coercive, is not only done under threat of punishment if you say no, it's also deceptive. Politicians can lie to your face and they know they'll get away with it, and you know there's no point trying to hold them accountable. What this means is that the government is the opposite of the free market, and where in the free market, every single transaction happens only because both sides are better off, and therefore every transaction makes the world a better place. When it comes to the government, the transaction happens or else. They take your tax money or else. They hand it out in the ways that they want to or else. And because of that, that's actually why governments always make things worse. They are trying to exist in complete defiance of the only system, free market capitalism, that can actually make the world a better place. And the reason why they can do that is because actually politicians already have your money. Because of this or else, they don't need to ask you for money, they just take it. If they want more, they just pass a law saying they can, or they go to the regulatory agency or the bureaucracy that governs whatever they choose to fiddle with, and they make those changes. See what they're doing with superannuation, for example. They can say, oh, well, you can access it under these circumstances, you can't on those, and by the way, we're going to add these fees and change these tax laws, etc. This beautiful big honeypot of your savings, your mandatory savings that you were forced coercively to save for your own good, of course, by the government. Well, it's now a plaything that the government gets to fiddle with the edges of. And if Australia ever ends up in real financial strife or in a serious war, you'd better believe they are going to be grabbing that money for their own purposes. Nothing is safe from the hand of the government because they can force you to do whatever it is they choose. So they've already got your money. They already own you in a very real sense. So what they want from you is not your money. And that's what makes them scary. What politicians, bureaucrats, and regulators want from you is your obedience. You see, we've gone from a world where the government used to be your servant. It was small, it was relatively powerless, it could only really do for you the things that you could have done for yourself, but there are things that we agreed to aggregate to a government for them to serve us in organising and administrating and doing. But the government today doesn't believe it's a servant at all. It believes that it's a master. Politicians, for example, don't go out to the marketplace saying, I dedicate this government to pursuing whatever you believe is in your best interest. No, no, no. They go to the marketplace, they go to voters saying, I'm going to pursue this agenda. And then if you vote for them, they say, well, I've got a mandate for my agenda. My policy agenda has a mandate from the Australian people. Well, actually, the Australian people were never asked. We just were given a very limited number of choices and we had to stick a number one next to one of them. One of them ends up in the big chair and gets to claim that they have this mandate from the Australian people who they never actually asked or consulted with. Politicians don't want your money. They want your obedience. And that makes them so much scarier than any billionaire business person that just wants your money. Politicians believe that nothing is outside the jurisdiction of government. Government is now the master, and I would go so far as to say that they believe that government is now God. I wrote an entire book about that called Good Christians Break Bad Laws. It's available on Amazon right now or through my own website, goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Governments believe that they are God, that they can make rules about anything. Nothing is outside of their jurisdiction, and if they make a rule and you don't obey it, then you're not just wrong, but you're evil and you need to be punished. You need to be brought into line. You need to be made to obey. Governments don't care about your money. They've already got that. What they care about is your obedience, and that's what makes them so dangerous. There's a well-known truism. I don't know who said it first. I'd give them credit if I could, but I don't know who it was. There's a well-known understanding about money. When you spend your own money on yourself, you care about the price because it's your money coming out of your pocket, and you care about the quality of the thing that you're buying. Is it fit for purpose? Is it what you need, what you want? Will it last? You care about both sides, how much it costs and whether it's any good. But if you're, for example, spending the boss's money on a Christmas party or on some widget or other, and you get to keep that thing or you get to experience the thing, well, it's not your money that you're spending, so you care a bit less about the price. You'll spend as much as you think you can get away with to make the thing as good as possible, because you do get that. You do experience that thing. So you care about the quality, you care about the product, the result, but you don't really care about the price. Conversely, if you're spending your own money on a present for somebody else, well, you care very much about the price. You're going to set a price cap and you're going to stick to it, but you don't really care about the thing. That's kind of disposable to you because you're going to hand it over, they're going to say thank you, and then your interaction with that thing is done. You're never going to see it again. You don't really care about the product, the end result, whether it's any good, whether it lasts. You just need to keep the price under control because it's your money, but it's not your thing. But politicians, well, they're not spending their money. They're taking it out of your pocket, and they're not spending it on themselves either. They're just throwing the money out there to buy votes. So they don't care about the cost, and they don't care about the result and the product, as long as it results in obedience to them, because that's the one thing they do care about, and votes for them so that they can continue their careers and continue that position of power that they love so much. This is why government destroys everything it touches, because they're spending money that isn't theirs and they don't care about the results. They really don't care whether the product is actually worth it, was worth the money, whether it lasts, whether it was fit for purpose, whether it was needed. None of those things matter. What matters is that everyone does as they're told. The people they're taking the money from shut up and let it be taken. The people they're throwing the money at express gratitude and take the money and then vote for them when the next election cycle comes around. This is why government cannot be fixed. You cannot tweak government and fix it because at the most fundamental level, it is destroying value in everything it touches. Capitalism, free trade, voluntary exchange creates value in every transaction because neither side would do the transaction if it wasn't good for them in their opinion. Government destroys everything it touches because it does it through coercion and deception and destroys value with every transaction. Every tax dollar it takes is destruction of value. Every project it funds is destruction of value because they care neither about the price nor about the result. Government cannot be fixed. It can only be minimized. There's a lot of people out there that say to me, Topher, you don't understand. This thing, healthcare, roads, national defense, whatever it is, this thing is so important, we have to give it to the government, as though that's the highest level of care. I say, no, no, no. That thing is way too important to ever be entrusted to something as awful as government. If you believe something is important, take charity, for example. I believe that the poor should not be left destitute. But I would never, ever wish something that important to be put into the hands of people that incompetent and who frankly don't care about the results. I would never want to put the poor into the hands of the government. I would never want to put the courts into the hands of the government, such an incompetent, wasteful organization that really frankly doesn't care about the results. And you might be reacting a little bit, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, whether it's courts, whether it's national defense. You might be sitting there going, but Topher, government has to do these things. There's no other way. Well, it's funny, another truism, I don't remember again who said this originally, talks about the fact that if every child was put into school at, let's say, 6 months of age, and as they grew up at 1 year and 2 years old, a teacher taught them how to walk, within 2 generations, people wouldn't believe you could teach a child to walk at home. They'd think you have to send the child to school in order for them to learn how to walk because that's all they've ever seen, that's all they've ever known. And for us, we're 2, 3 generations into a world where the government controlled and ran every aspect of our lives. And it's hard to imagine that it's not necessary, that it doesn't have to be that way. But actually, only a few generations ago, it wasn't that way at all. There was no income tax in America. They had roads, they had railways, they had universities, they had hospitals, even for the poor. They had poorhouses and charities and soup kitchens. And there were no income taxes at that point in time. How come we've got to the point in just a few short generations that we think, well, we have to give the government 30% of everything that we earn and then pay a bunch of other consumer taxes on top just to fund all these essential services that only the government can do? We've been duped. Now, that's understandable. That's all we've ever known. It's all we've ever seen. But we need to break out of that thinking and realize that actually, if you think these things are really that important, and I agree they are, education, vitally important, phenomenally important, healthcare, yeah, I want good healthcare. I want world-class healthcare. Thank you very much for myself, for my parents, for my kids. Absolutely. These things are way too important to entrust into the hands of an organization that is inherently destructive. It destroys everything it touches because every transaction, every action is based on coercion and deception. It can be no other way. You cannot reform the government into becoming a force for good. You can only minimize the government and keep it out of everything that matters. The problem is those people that keep saying to me, we have to give this to the government. It's too important. We have to give it to the government. And I keep on saying, well, no, it's too important to give to the government. The problem is they keep winning the argument and all these things keep being given to the government. And then I keep being proven right because it falls to pieces. It becomes a shambles. Look at healthcare. Look at education. We're throwing more and more money. The NDIS, I covered that just earlier this week. We're throwing phenomenal amounts of money for very little result. Why? Well, because they're not spending their money and they're not spending it on themselves. They don't care about the cost and they don't care about the result. We're spending phenomenal amounts of money per student on education and our education standards are slipping. How could those two things be true? Well, because they don't care about the price and they don't care about the product. What politicians care about is being seen to be doing something and then for everyone else to play along, everyone else to obey and to comply. Okay, so that's the problem and it's baked into the cake. There's nothing we can do to fix government. So what do you do about it? Am I just having a whinge? We're just going to despair and all nod our heads and go, oh, well, too bad, how sad. Well, there's not much you can do about it, but there is a few things. And together it adds up to something really quite substantial. The first thing you need to do for your own sake is to minimize your dependence on and interaction with the government. The less you have to do with the government, the better. whether that's less to do with government schools or government healthcare or Centrelink or other types of programs, the less interaction you have with the government, the better your life is going to be. The less you depend on things that the government regulates, the food chain, healthcare is an obvious one. The less you're dependent on these things that the government has total control over, the better your life is going to be. Now, that's not going to change the world, but it could change your world, reducing your interactions with the government as much as possible. But also, I'm going to say you need to find and support those few crazy people out there who believe that this problem can be fixed by minimizing the government. Now, these people are branded as kooks and crazies. Harvey Mill, the now president of Argentina, spent decades being derided as a kook as he was a economics lecturer at the university there. He was some crazy guy with these weird wacko ideas about extremely small government, some libertarian lecturer at a university somewhere. He endured decades of being the crazy guy before suddenly he's the president of Argentina and is now showing the world how it's done when it comes to getting the government out of our lives. Ron Paul, the US senator, spent decades as that lone voice crying in the wilderness. The crazy uncle kind of vibes is how people looked at him. Oh yeah, he thinks we don't need a federal Department of Education. He thinks we don't need a federal Department of Health, that the states should just take care of that stuff without the federal government being involved. He's crazy. Well, thankfully, he was crazy. He argued his point for decades, and eventually it got through in a roundabout kind of way via Vivek Ramaswamy and this Doge project, which is about to start next week with the inauguration of Donald Trump. But that crazy guy, who for years was just this some fringe kook, is now actually has really shaped American politics going forward by being that crazy guy for all that time. I don't know where you're watching this from. You could be anywhere in the world. But find your crazy guy or girl. Find that person who's out there in the public discourse making the case for radical reductions in the size and power of government. Find that person, even if you look at them and go, oh, but there's no way, there's no chance, they're never going to be able to make a difference. Javier Milei was never going to be able to make a difference until suddenly he was the president of Argentina. Ron Paul is 89 years old and long retired and was never going to make a difference until now. He's one of the most influential voices, along with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and Donald Trump himself. He's one of the most influential voices right now, changing the future of the entire American empire. And sadly, yes, it is an empire, but changing that future for the better. Having been the kook for decades, find your kook, find your crazy, find that person or people that are really working hard. If you're in Australia, I'd suggest you have a look at the Libertarian Party. That happens to be the party that I tend to vote for. This is not a political ad. They're not sponsoring me. There's no actual relationship there. I mean, I know a lot of the people in there, but there's no financial relationship. There's no kickback. They don't even know that I'm recording this right now. But they're the people that I look at in Australia, the Libertarian Party. You might look at them and go, oh, that's a little bit crazy. That's a little bit kooky. They're a bit too far out for me. Yes. That's why they're actually good. That's what makes them better than all the mainstream parties that are just different shades of the same crap. These guys actually believe in something. They believe in you. They believe that you don't need the government breathing down your neck all the time. Just have a think about it. Now, the success of Harvey Mill in Argentina and the success of Doge, which of course is still unknown, it doesn't start till next week, but if it is successful, then it's going to make it a lot easier for you and I in our respective parts of the world to make the case that the same thing needs to happen in our own country. For me, that means here in Australia. So let's cross our fingers and hope that the Doge project goes very, very well, that we see radical reductions in the size and power of government, and that we can then take that fact that that's happening and bring those arguments home and make the case for why that has to happen where we are. Because the number one thing that I would like to see in my lifetime, the world that I would like to hand to my kids, is a world where the worst thing is someone that just wants your money. And that there's no one out there who wants something else. Because for me, that's the kind of world I'd much rather live in. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project. Thank you for watching.